Not so long ago, I had the opportunity to read Nietzsche Does Speak Zarathustra, and I still have much to learn about this book. One of the main topics is the will to power, and it took me a long time before I could figure out what will to power was. Today I came to discuss why do we want power. So first, what power truly is? Is it the capability to do something, or is it a feeling of freedom? To develop better this topic, we need to speak about childhood and the way people are raised. During our childhood, many of us learn how to be restrained. That is, our parents or society, school, we learn we have these limitations. We cannot say everything that pops into our heads, or we cannot do everything that we want to. For example, harming others or taking what doesn't belong to us. But the interesting fact is that this urges, this will of doing more than we are allowed to, these urges, they don't go away. They remain inside of us for the rest of our lives. But where? If I'm behaving myself in society, if I'm following the rules, the laws, if I'm being a well behaved citizen, how can I still have these urges that are not allowed? And the first thing we need to understand about these urges, they keep growing. You will always want to say more than you can. The greatest example is the intrusive thoughts. Can also come in the way of dreams. Usually in dreams we are doing what we can't do in reality. For example, we are having this big discussion with a supervisor, or we are having a burst of rage, or we are having sex with that girl that we always desired, but we never had the courage to go and speak to her. But how is it all related to will to power? First, we need to understand. First, we need to understand how this urge to power manifests itself in society. And the greatest example is my routine in a restaurant. I've been to many restaurants, I've been to many hotels, and I came to build this self-awareness around me that everybody is looking to exert more power than they have. Who never had that employee that is in the same level as you, but he wants to behave as a supervisor? Never had that employee that wants to become the boss of the restaurant and is always trying to rule around. Or another example, one will always try to tell you how to do the same thing but differently. And the why of this diversion is that basically they are trying to exert their own will to power. And this will to power can come in many ways. The first is trying to convince others of your opinion. That is, them following your truth. The second is trying to convince them to make the things you want, or trying to convince them to do the things in the same way as you do. The third is trying to make them behave like you do. That is, embodying the same personality, the same way of living. And I came to observe this will to power is not an end in itself. We are searching for power as means of freedom. Because coming back to that subject, that many of us live restrained, many of us have these obsessions, or we feel what Jung described as the shadow. These urges, they are repressed inside of us and they're waiting for release. However, as we live in society, many of the things that we believe are not going to be accepted by everybody, or what we do is not going to be permitted because that is not supposed to be the way how things go. And the only way we can find to release this repression, release all of these urges that we cannot exert is seeking power, growing financially or growing in status, because the more as you obtain that power, the more you're going to be allowed to be yourself. And what's the main problem of this? Is that when we don't release all of these accumulated urges inside of us, they tend to get even worse. That is, people having degrading sexual obsessions, or when that calm person has finally a burst of rage that scares everybody. What I'm trying to say is that this is sort of a snowball, and we should become aware to this shadow inside of us, because one time or another it is going to get accumulated so much that will manifest itself either in depression or an anxiety attack, a burnout, apathy, or even harm to others. One of the main cases we can use of the Jeffrey Epstein that simply embodies everything that is repressed in society, and it is released once you give enough power, money, political influence. What's the best way to build self-awareness of the shadow once it gets corrupted or before it gets corrupted? One exercise I've been doing my whole life was to detach myself from situations, trying to build a voice in my mind that invites me to reflect on what's happening around me. Socrates called it a demo, and it's quite similar to Tony Stark, uh, Jarvis. It can sound kind of crazy, but this voice I built inside of my head is like an AI. So I'm passing through a very stressful situation. I'm going to invite this voice, and this voice is going to tell me what I'm doing, what is the other face of what's happening around me. For example, someone comes and says something very harmful to me. This voice comes and say, "Yes, maybe this was just the way this person was raised. Maybe you're just very stressed in this moment because you couldn't manifest what you want. Maybe this is just not the place that you wanted to be, but is the condition that you are right now." So it's quite having a wise man inside of our heads. That tends to be very useful because many of us don't have someone to tell what's right and wrong. Many of us don't have the opportunity to have a friend that's going to awake us from the emotional state that is so attached to the situation that you are right now. And I say this because the best way to outbest ourselves is trying to make us our own coaches. Because in truth, we we all have we all have the knowledge of moral values would to put us in each other's places, but we don't have a source of power inside of our heads to call our attention to this. And I would like to close this video inviting everybody to read Nietzsche Thus Spake Zarathustra, because I still think this book has a lot to tell us about the current moment we live in. I'm also going to finish this video. I have some deers close to me.